When Donald Trump announced reciprocal tariffs on the world, the EU's response was to seek solidarity with China in the face of US tariffs applied to countries around the world and the EU collectively. The problem with this is that when it comes to China, the European Union is essentially in the same position as the United States. Now, they may have sought bonding with China over this type of issue because they were in a similar position in the fact that the EU has a trade surplus with the United States. The EU has a $200 billion, 200 billion euro trade surplus with the United States. China also has a large trade surplus with the United States. However, the EU also has a trade deficit with China. So when it comes to China, the EU is in the exact same position as the United States with regard to China. And the problem here is that China has massive subsidies for the highest productivity industries in the world and the most technologically advanced industries in the world. And one of the largest industries that China is currently targeting on all levels is the automotive industry. This comes in the form of internal combustion engine cars as well as EVs and all the supply chains that go along with it. And importantly, when it comes to EVs, this is batteries, which China dominates the supply chain for batteries as well. And this leaves the European Union very vulnerable when it comes to China and the export of cars from China to the European Union. So the European leadership is caught on the horns of a dilemma. On one hand, they have their underlying philosophy, and this is a globalist philosophy of open borders, human rights, and zero carbon emissions. On the other hand, they see what China is doing and they see what the Chinese automotive industry is doing. And the reason I'm mentioning the Chinese automotive industry is because the automotive industry in China is the most salient threat to European industry at the moment. Now, all European industry is at risk from Chinese industry, and this is due to the subsidies that the Chinese government puts into the highest productivity industries and the largest industries and the most valuable global industries. So China doesn't really care about European automotive industry. Now, the Europeans can see that their automotive industry is being targeted and that the Chinese automotive industry can easily destroy the European automotive industry. And they could do it essentially in a year, maybe 2 years, essentially eliminate it. Now, automotive industries have essentially been eliminated from many countries over the years and over the decades. The British automotive industry is essentially gone and foreign owned. You could say the same thing for a number of European countries. But really, the heart of European automotive industry is Germany, and they're on the chopping block now. The problem is that the European leadership are wedded to these philosophical goals and ideas that they see as the future of the world, which again are the open borders, global governance. They want a top down global governance, essentially UN headed world that decides all the things that go on when it comes to the entire world. China doesn't have a globalist centric worldview. China has a China centric worldview. And that means capturing the most profitable industries, the high tech industries, the highest productivity industries, because all of these industries benefit China. And it gives China leverage and power economically, militarily, in every way to negotiate its way in the world and dominate the world. Now, Europe's in a precarious position because it's entirely dependent on manufactured goods exports. These are the highest productivity industries in Europe. Otherwise, without manufactured goods, a lot of Europe's industry is very low productivity. And if Europe is stuck with only low productivity industries, that means the living standards of Europe will have to decline much further than where they are today. They've already been losing ground against countries like the United States for a number of decades. And the gap between productivity and standard of living between the European Union and the United States has just been an increasing gap, with the United States pulling further and further ahead year after year, decade after decade. So finally, at the recent G7 summit in Canada, Ursula von der Leyen finally admitted Donald is right, and that's in regards to China. And that is essentially the Europeans finally having some sense of self preservation and realizing they can't allow China to flood Europe with their manufactured products, and especially cars and automotive products. And time is really of the essence when it comes to this, because China's sales in Europe are already taking off. Now, the Chinese government wants to have and submitted a proposal to Europe about having a minimum price floor of about 30,000 euros on cars. Now, this doesn't help Europe that much. It helps China a lot because they get higher profits on their cars with a 30,000 euro minimum price. The minimum price floor was rejected, though, which is a good thing because it doesn't really help European manufacturers become more competitive amongst themselves when there is a price floor on things. It's also not great for consumers. So there's just a number of issues with this that you wouldn't want. The easier route to go and the better route to go would be for the European Union just to raise tariffs on Chinese cars. It's the only way they're going to preserve their industry, because time is of the essence. Again, I've said that before. Time is of the essence. They have to stop the bleeding in their industry right away. Otherwise, it will just go away, and a lot of European productivity will go away, and they will be even more dependent on China in the future than they are today. Now, China already holds an ACE card, and that is the card that has to do with critical minerals and rare earth minerals. They're using the rare earths minerals card as a bargaining chip against the United States and against the European Union, and they're going to use it against anyone else. And the interesting thing is, the rare earths minerals industry is a relatively small industry, but because it's so key when it comes to electronics and electric motors in particular, there are large swaths of the economy that cannot function, large swaths of manufacturing that cannot function without the rare earth elements, especially when it comes to magnets. So Europe can't afford to have any more damage when it comes to trade. They've already lost pipeline gas, which has really destroyed a lot of the chemical industry, especially in Germany, and a lot of basic materials that are dependent on cheap pipeline gas. Now, a lot of the gas is having to come in through LNG by ship. It's much more expensive, and it makes Europe uncompetitive when it comes to producing a lot of basic materials that are needed for other industries. Europe really is beset with a panoply of issues right now. Everything from energy to regulation to demographics and demographic decline in a lot of ways, to immigration, energy security, military security. And at the root of a lot of these are the globalist philosophy and the zero carbon philosophy. And these problems are not going to be solved quickly. The immediate thing they have to do is really put up tariffs to staunch the bleeding from their economy, because once they lose these industries, they won't be able to get them back, not easily. Probably take decades or generations to do it, because they've got so many other issues piled up upon them. And when it comes to energy, the United States is happy to provide liquid natural gas to Europe, but that's really not in Europe's interest. Over the long term, Europe, and especially Germany, is going to have to mend fences with Russia and get pipeline gas back again. Pipeline gas is the feedstock for so many basic materials and basic chemicals at the top of the supply chain. If Europe doesn't have that, and especially if the industrialized parts of Europe don't have that, they will never be competitive in these industries again. And they're going to have a future of misery and poverty. So, my message to Europe is raise tariffs on China immediately. If you want any industrial future at all, it has to be done now to staunch the bleeding that's going on. Now, Europe has plenty of inefficiencies in their industries, and those can be sorted out. But if you don't protect your industries right now, I mean, this year, they will be gone, they will be wiped out, and they will be incredibly difficult to ever rebuild again. You won't have a chance to make them efficient because they'll be completely gutted. If you got this far in the video, I thank you for watching. And I'm sure I'll have a lot of disagreements with commenters when it comes to tariffs. I know it's not a popular opinion, especially when I haven't explained all the details of my positions and my support for tariffs. I actually believe in market solutions for most things. And if you're interested in this kind of content, please subscribe, and I'll be making more videos about these types of topics in the future. And I hope to explain some of my reasoning behind tariffs in the future as well. So thanks for watching.